All right, guys, here's our second round of screencasts for this unit. The early years, the forming of a nation. George Washington retired, had retired. In comes the next generation. And in this generation of presidents, we have the birth of political parties. We have the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Alexander Hamilton founds the Federalist Party. They believe in a strong federal government, central government, known as Washington, D.C., and a very loose interpretation of the Constitution. I'll talk about what that means in just a second. Jefferson and Madison developed the Democratic Republicans to oppose the Federalists. They believe in a weaker central government but stronger state governments and a very strict interpretation of the Constitution. Now, that loose and strict interpretation, if someone believes in a loose interpretation, well, let me start with the strict interpretation. If you believe in a strict interpretation, you can only do what the Constitution says, nothing more, nothing less. That's a strict interpretation. If it doesn't say I can do it, I can't do it. The loose interpretation is along the lines of, well, it doesn't say I can do it, but it doesn't say I can't either. So if it doesn't say I can't, then I'm going to take my liberties and I'm going to do it anyway. That's the difference there. These become the original political parties, and they start up in the 1796 election just after George Washington leaves, just after he tells us, don't do political parties. And what do? Set up two political parties. It goes down between John Adams, a Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. These guys were the closest of friends. Now, in this election, they turn into bitter rivals. And actually, their friendship ends for years because of this election. And to add in the following election, and just the mudslinging in this campaign. It sets the groundwork for today's political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. But we'll get to them later. The election of 1796, Adams versus Jefferson. Adams receives 71 electoral votes. Jefferson receives 68. Clearly, Adams wins. Jefferson comes in second place. So, he becomes the vice president. That law will be changed later because when you have two people running for the same office, they're going to have different opinions. And when you have a vice president and a president, they have two different opinions, they're going to fight. So this is the way they do it for now. It will change later. France sees our change in leadership as opportunity. They begin to attack and seize American ships. They're still at war, guys. They're still fighting with England, with Europe, essentially. Napoleon Bonaparte has taken control, and they're starting to really attack and try to conquer things. The Federalists call for war. John Adams himself goes, let's not quite jump into that yet. He sends three men, Charles Pinckney, Gerry, and Marshall. They go to France to negotiate. They request a meeting with the French minister Talleyrand Périgord, and, well, they're met by three French agents. But for intensive purposes, we're going to refer to these agents as Agent X, Agent Y, and Agent Z. They say, hey, you want to meet with the minister? Okay. Give us $10 million to the country of France, and then an additional $250,000 for the minister himself. Pinckney, Gerry, and Marshall are appalled. They're furious with the French, and they say, forget this. No, not a chance. They go back to America, and we're ready to wage war. This becomes known as the XYZ affair. Americans get so upset, so mad at this, George Washington is ready to come out of retirement. This is before he passes away. He's ready to come out of retirement and lead the army against the French. This political cartoon depicts the XYZ affair. I'm going to point out a couple of things. Here we have the three American diplomats. This many-headed monster represents France. Okay, you see he's got a knife in one hand, a torch in the other. The torch, thinking about the Statue of Liberty, of course, means peace. But the many faces of France Are we looking for liberty? Are we looking for war? What are they doing? What face are we going to get? Continuing on over here, we have the minister, the French minister right here. And he's sitting down with a couple of shady creatures right here that look a little bit like demons. And they're eating frogs because, well, that's what they do in France. They eat frogs, frog legs at least. And then up here, we have another demon with a headless guy laying on what we know to be the guillotine. So this author is saying that the French Revolution was pushed by the devil, essentially. Demons, and this may be Lucifer, the devil himself, in this political cartoon. They call it the civic feast. Sitting down to eat frogs with the devil. And notice this little creepy guy over here, he's got his hand in the minister's pocket. A little corrupt if you're getting the message. Eventually, France backs down and they apologize, treating us with a little bit more respect before we go to war. But damage was done. Adams is scared now. People are starting to talk ill about him, talk smack, essentially. And especially foreigners. So he goes and does something, and he and his cabinet and Congress pass something called the Alien and Sedition Acts. This does a couple of things. One, it increases waiting time to become a citizen. It was 5 years. They almost triple it to 14 years. They ban people from saying anything false or harmful about the government. False is one thing. Can't lie. But anything harmful about the government? You're treading on constitutional rights there. And you guys can talk about that on your own. It allowed unloyal aliens to be arrested or deported. If you were not loyal to America, if you did not support everything America was, you could be kicked out or arrested. Jefferson, the vice president, argues it's against states' rights. It's against the Constitution. He thought it was unconstitutional. Eventually, in the year 1800, the acts expire or were repealed. We don't fully know. But in 1800, Adams convinced France to sign a convention, essentially or effectively restoring peace. Also in 1800, we have Adams versus Jefferson. Again, Jefferson's like, I'm not going to let this one go. I'm going to run for president. Again. This election gets really nasty. Adams loses big time. He only gets 65 electoral votes, where Jefferson gets 73 and Aaron Burr gets 73. We have a tie. So, in terms of a tie for electoral college counts, it goes down to the House of Representatives. Alexander Hamilton steps in. Hamilton says, you know what? I don't like Jefferson, but at least I know his heart's in the right place. We disagree on almost everything, but at least I know he's a stand-up guy. We may hate each other, but Burr, on the other hand, well, Burr is just evil, to Hamilton at least. Hamilton convinces his friend Bayard to help convince the Federalists not to vote for Burr. It took 35 times, 35 votes, for the House of Representatives to finally vote and elect Thomas Jefferson as president. Burr becomes the vice president. They're both Democratic Republicans. Burr took this horribly personally. Hamilton did something very much like this to him again when he ran for governor of New York later. And at that point, Burr challenges Hamilton to a duel. 10 paces and fire. This is on July 11th, 1804. Essentially, Aaron Burr was still the vice president when he shoots and kills Hamilton. Hamilton, reports say, fires up in the air just to say, look, I'm not going to shoot. Burr doesn't care. He shoots Hamilton in the stomach, and he dies the next day from his injuries. On Adams' way out of office, because after the election, he's known as these days he would have been known as a lame duck. But before then, he knew he was leaving office, So he passes all these new laws, one of them being the Judiciary Act of 1801, which reorganized the court system, which allowed him to add a lot more judges, Federalist judges. They become known as the Midnight Judges. All right. Eventually, it is repealed, but it leads to a major Supreme Court case known as Marbury versus Madison. All right, and it comes down to a justice by the name of William Marbury. Marbury was one of those midnight judges. The problem is that he never got his paperwork. He knew he got the position. The paperwork had never been filed, had never been delivered. And when James Madison stepped in as our new Secretary of State, it was sitting on his desk. Because James Madison was one of Jefferson's closest friends. Jefferson makes him Secretary of State. Madison refuses to put the paperwork through. Marbury argues that I have every right to this. Supreme Court hears the case. One of the biggest things that comes out of Marbury versus Madison is the precedent of judicial review, where they're able to look at things and say, hey, you know what? I might be reviewing this case, but I see something else, and I'm telling you it's illegal. Jefferson comes in and totally shakes up the administration. He allows the Alien Sedition Acts to expire. Anyone that had been put in jail, he presidentially pardons. He eliminated the whiskey tax, reduced federal government, cut the size of the military, and used tariffs, import taxes to pay off American debt, because he wanted to lessen the power of the federal government to allow the states to have a little bit more strength. But he uses federal strength and actually grows his own power in the Louisiana Purchase. He was able to buy the territory of Louisiana from France for a mere $15 million. 3 cents an acre. And I'm talking Louisiana, I'm talking all of this, not just the state we know today as Louisiana. Buys it from France. France is still at war. Napoleon is still bent on world domination, and he needs money for it. He figures he'll just get that back from us later when he conquers us after he has conquered Europe and Asia. That day will never come, but those are his aspirations. President Jefferson chooses 2 men, Captain Meriwether Lewis and Lieutenant William Clark, to explore the Louisiana Territory, take notes, and kind of let him know what's out there. In summer of 1803, the 2 men, along with 38 others, about 40 men total, they go out in a group called the Corps of Discovery. They leave from the city of St. Louis. They meet up with a fur trader and a guide, along with his 17-year-old wife, Sacagawea. You guys probably know Sacagawea. The proper pronunciation is Sacagawea. She serves more as an interpreter, not a guide. The French fur trader was the guide. They explore the Missouri River all the way through the Oregon country to the Pacific Ocean, where they get there during the winter of 1806. They return winter of 1805 to 1806. They return to St. Louis September 23rd, 1806. Only one guy of these 40 died, and he died of appendicitis. He had a burst appendix. Even in modern day society, that's dangerous and deadly. So the fact that that's the only thing that killed someone on this journey, pretty impressive.